studios having to cater to a little bit more of that casual, brief, and like easy to access landscape. So those things that make yoga like so wonderful in that they're easy to access also sometimes make people who are looking for a deeper immersion have to find a more specialized environment.
That was Jason Crandell. Hey everyone, and welcome to another Yogi Misfit Sessions. My name is Danny Pomploon, and I am your host. Welcome to session 104. Today, I've got Jason Crandell on the show, which I'm super pumped about. Jason was one of like my first main teachers when I was living in San Diego, and I knew I wanted to kind of dive deeper into the yoga practice. Someone had invited me to go to a yoga journal conference. They don't have them anymore. But anyway, I had taken a class with Jason and Stephanie and then a couple other people, and I really resonated with his style. And he's one of the big reasons why I ended up moving to San Francisco and studying, close by him. And I got to learn a lot. He's an incredibly smart man, also really funny and really witty. But yeah, I'm super honored to have him on the show today. He's been such a huge influence on how I teach yoga. And it's just really great to have him on the show. Before we get started, I kind of mentioned this last episode, but for all of you listening out there, I launched a yoga app. Like the full-on Danny Pomploon yoga app is live. So you can literally take me into your pocket with you. It's available on the iTunes store now and also on the Google store, the Android store anyway. And there's a free version out right now. So there's 6 classes and there's 2 courses on there. One of them is about building your arm balances. The other one is about strength and yoga. But yeah, there's a good plethora of stuff. You can do some mellow flows. You can do like a power flow. You can check it out. And again, it's 100% my gift to you guys. So check it out. See if you love it. Tell me about it. Any feedback is always welcomed. I totally just appreciate it so much. And the last thing that I really wanted to mention, I'm super excited about. We just updated our podcast/support page. So there's actually a place for you guys to go and check it out where all the podcast stuff will be living. The link is down below. It's dannypomploon.com/support. That was really hard for me to say. And you can check it out. As always, the show doesn't happen without your guys' love. We're doing some Patreon stuff right now. We're doing some giveaways on there. We're asking people to donate to 2 to 108. I'm bringing it all back. Just to help sustain the show and keep it going. But check it out. We give you guys a little shout, and it tells you a little more about where the money is going and why it's going there. And, the more you guys support the show, the more awesome content I can put out and the more awesome guests like Jason I can have, on the show and just keep everything going and whatnot. So check it out. Super stoked on it. And we give you guys a little shout down at the bottom for supporting the show. There's been a handful of you guys that have been supporting already, and we cannot thank you enough. It takes a village to keep this well-oiled machine going. There's a lot of hands in this. Big shout out to our friends over at SF Yoga Magazine. You guys are phenomenal and awesome, and you rock. And to you listeners out there, you guys are awesome as well. Check out the support page, dannypomploon.com/support. Without further ado, here comes session 108 with my guy, Jason Crandell. Jason Crandell, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Danny.
How are you? How's everything going?
I'm doing really well. How about you?
I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, but I'm coming out swinging. So good. Yeah.
All right, you'll handle it.
Still trying to do the most, but we all know how that goes.
I do.
So listen, I know you are busy. You've got a ton going on. You're always, teaching, traveling around, programs and all that stuff. So it's really nice to just spend this time with you. And I haven't really spent a lot of time with you in person. You have been my teacher for many years, but I too have been doing the same stuff, just traveling around and as we say, keeping up in the yoga world can be a little challenging and tough. So
yeah, I have the same issues with my teachers.
Yeah. Do you actually still practice with your teachers, or like how often do you get to connect?
I haven't taken class with Richard in probably 10 years. I mean, I read
Okay.
his books and they're really influential. Rodney's been a couple years. I mean, it used to be easier for me to take their classes when the Yoga Journal conferences were still around, because
Right.
then we'd all be in the same time. We'd all be in the same place.
Right.
But it's really difficult to do. Rodney's been on the East Coast for a long time. He comes back and teaches once in a while, but it's really difficult with my schedule, especially with having a family. It gets tricky.
Do you still touch base with them like pretty well and often, or is it?
No. I used to touch base with Rodney pretty consistently, even after he moved. But, I still think frequently and fondly of both of them and some of my other teachers. But it hasn't been like an ongoingly active relationship in a while.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. There's some, I guess, sometimes where you kind of float in and out as needed, or you try to at least keep that connection,
Yeah, and those both of them were so important and instrumental to me for such a formative period of my yoga teacher practice and development that I feel like I'm still incredibly inspired by what they shared with me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those aren't really active relationships.
I think I was practicing with you in the city up until maybe like the last year-ish. I'd try to float in as much as I could. And then as things you can't ever take any other yoga teachers' classes because everyone's teaching at the same time. Like literally,
it really is tricky.
Yeah. So, but I still am practicing with you. It's funny because you're literally a few blocks away from me. The Love Story is like a half a block away from my house, and yet I still can't see you in person.
It doesn't matter. I'm only there twice, and it's probably your teaching, so
yeah.
So it goes.
Yeah. So Rodney was like one of your first teachers, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my early development happened pretty quickly. My first teacher was a teacher named Bobby Norris. She was actually a pretty instrumental teacher in the Bay Area in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. That was at San Francisco State University. So I had 1 credit hour left to graduate from college, and I took yoga to get that 1 credit hour. So she was there, and then I had a couple of other kind of brief teachers that were mostly Ashtanga teachers.
Yeah.
And then I came to Rodney. I would say I was 2 years into my practice, but I had also been practicing with him via DVDs. Actually, I had been practicing with him via a VHS.
What's a VHS?
You'll never know.
Was that like back in the days of CDs? No, I totally had both.
Before CDs, man. Crazy. But yeah, so I feel really fortunate that such a high caliber, that I was with such high caliber teachers at such a relatively young and formative phase of my development.
Yeah, for sure. I understand.
Yeah.
A couple things that I wanted to get into. I mean, I wish I could have hours and hours and hours with you, but I've been thinking a lot about recently, and it's interesting to see my own growth as a teacher has changed. It changes all the time, but where I used to value a lot, an hour class and get it in and let's get sweaty and let's get moving. Now I'm no, I don't know how I did that or why I did that for as long as I did until, you don't know until you know. And I'm starting to notice that the trend of making that hour even shorter is popping up left and right.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good thing. It's a good thing I don't pay. I'm too self-absorbed. I don't pay. I have no idea that that's true, but yeah, that seems woefully short. It makes sense. It makes sense. Look, I do shorter than an hour-long practices by myself all the time, but those are little home practices, and I'll never underestimate the value of a short home practice. But to gear up to go all the way to class and have that group experience, I think an hour starts to be a really minimum duration.
Well, it's almost like you're trying to cram everything in and not just the physical stuff. I feel like there's also, this spiritual component. It's almost like everything's starting to get slammed into this 1 hour and then boom, you're out the door. Like a pretty little bow gets put on it and then you're out and you're good.
Yeah, one of the things that I see with the contemporary yoga practices, We want it to fill so many different of our individual needs, right? We want it to move our body. We want it to move our hearts. We want it to move our mind. We want to feel spiritual. And it's difficult to layer in all of those components in any class, let alone a relatively short increment of time. For sure, that's tough.
Mm-hmm. What was it like? I mean, I guess back in the day, you know, I remember I was just chatting with you about this, but like one of the things that really stuck out in my training and really with you, it was when you talked about like what yoga was like, the classes that you used to go to in the past, it was like 2 to 3 hours minimum, you know, and you guys would sit there and like go over stuff, and there wasn't music. There wasn't like this, you know, element of this, and this, and it wasn't necessarily, it was almost a, you know, classroom setting.
Yeah, I can go through that, and I'll say I think there are some real upsides to what I'm going to describe, but also I don't want to be unfair. I think there's a couple of downsides too. So
sure.
The two things that jump out to me when I think about yoga classes, even just 20 years ago or a little over 20 years ago, is they were much smaller and they were more specific. Right. So it was a little bit more like a classroom environment. And just thinking about Rodney's classes at that time, like Rodney had been on Oprah. Rodney was, you know, he was the most commercially known yoga teacher around. And his class was considered packed. There were 45 people in it. That was right. Like that was the biggest class around. And that was like shockingly big. Right. So the scale has really changed. So pretty much every Tuesday when I would be there, every Tuesday or every Wednesday morning, those were kind of the two environments that I went to. Wednesday morning was an invitation only class, and it was 3 hours. And the Tuesday night was a pretty standard 90-minute class. But one of the first things that comes away from me is everyone that was there was the same person that was there last week and the same person that will be there next week.
Wednesday morning was like yoga fight club.
Yeah, there wasn't much turnover. You know, so like if you practiced yoga, you pretty much, and there weren't as many options, right? So there weren't as few options. There weren't as many options. There weren't as many practitioners. And the environment was, I won't say strict, but it was a little bit more specific. So you really had to want to not just do yoga, but you really had to want to learn yoga a little bit like it's a subject matter, you know? So I think that the nature of that environment, I don't want to say it was, I don't want to say that it wasn't inclusive, but if you were just kind of a casual person that wanted to move and sweat, that's not what you did. Right. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be, I don't think that it was the right environment. And so as such, I think that the teachers of that era, they were working with a smaller crew and they were working with a consistent crew. So their ability to actually teach certain details and certain techniques and certain postures over time was a little bit easier because it was a more homogenous group in that it was just like a very consistent group of students that were pretty much looking for the same things.
Right. When did it all start to shift?
Well, I'm going to give you another example too. I used to go to Ramanand's class. Ramanand Patel is an older generation teacher, but really seminal. He taught a lot of people, still teaches a lot of people who are really influential, exceptional people. And Ramanand's class was a teachers only class, and it was 3 hours. And it was, I think I was either once a week or it was once a month. And it was during the day. You know, earlier you said that it's tough for us to go to the same classes, right? So this class was from 1 to 4 every day. So it was built for teachers, and it was it was kind of in the slot between most people's teaching schedule. And the first hour of that was really just questions and answers. So everyone in that room was pretty much, for that class, you had to sign up for a whole series. So for 12 weeks, it was the same people. And essentially the first hour were just technical questions or philosophical questions or spiritual questions. And Ramanand would handle those with skill and a fair amount of humor. And then there was a 2 hour pretty active asana practice, not active like flowy, but active more in what at that time was a more traditional Iyengar experience. So a lot of refinement, long and relatively long holds.
So the start of the practice was just like a kind of open topic, or would
Totally
he start
open
the
topic.
class?
All right, you guys, what do you want? What are your questions? Hour.
So if someone was like yamas and niyamas, and he'd just dive into that or whatever it was. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was really great. Like I always enjoyed that, but then again, like that was my subject. You know what I mean? Like there are things I like to go to the gym, but I don't want to study running. You know what I mean? Like that. I don't have a passion for running. I want to do it to have good cardiovascular shape. Right. So I wasn't in that era. I think that people were going to yoga for a lot of reasons. But you wouldn't be in that room with Ramanand for that period of time if you just wanted to get flexible and strong. You were really open to that kind of Q&A, and you were looking for someone like Ramanand that's just had an incredible amount of experience and insight.
How do we bring that back? Like I would right now, that's what I like. I mean, I would crave that.
You know, where people get it, Danny, is people get it in their trainings. It's kind of like, you know, it's difficult. There's a lot of studios that have tried at different times to have like a teacher-led class and so forth, but it's really hard to make happen, because even if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, that sounds good, then when it's time to do it, you're like, oh my God, I have to do another thing today. I'm already teaching 3 classes, going to 3 days, you know? So I think it's just a challenge with the modern landscape.
Hey guys, this episode is supported by Brettonbush Hot Springs. They're a super cool remote retreat center located in the Oregon Cascade Mountain Range. The thing I love about this retreat center is they have tons of offerings every year. Some of them are based on movement, some are based on meditation, but pretty much anything you're looking for, you can find. The other thing I really, really, really enjoy is that they have tons of trails that connect to the Pacific Coast Trail itself, which is super cool, or Pacific Crest Trail. All their food comes from their farm, so it's local, it's all organic and sourced right then and there. Check out brettonbush.com. That's BRIETENBUSH.com. And now, back to our show. When do you think it changed? And like more importantly, like why? Why do you think it I mean, I know it's because it obviously got more popular, and so it started to pop up everywhere, and so the different varieties started to happen. But why did it start to change away from that systematic, like, okay, this is a classroom thing, and now this is more of like a fitness-based thing, and now it's just kind of a free-for-all, you do whatever you want?
Well, I think, okay, just from my only my anecdotal experience, more places started offering yoga that catered to people with a much broader set of interests. And so that to me is a very good thing, but it's also one of the things that somewhat changed the landscape, right? So you kind of think about what type of person and what type of lifestyle and what set of interests are going to go to a yoga class for 3 hours in the middle of the day. And the answer is not many. They're yoga teachers, right? So as more people, as gyms, as health clubs, as every yoga studio started to pop up, I think that the interest in yoga has increased, but people are looking to yoga. Look, there are still many people practicing that same way, but because there are so many people practicing in such a diverse environment now, you have a lot of people that look, they 1 day a week they climb, 1 day a week they do Barry's boot camp, 2 days a week they do yoga, and then 3 days.
Don't forget Soul Cycle.
Yeah, right. So I actually think that's a really good thing, but that also somewhat leads to the environment that we have of studios having to cater to a little bit more of that casual, brief, and like easy to access landscape. So those things that make yoga like so wonderful in that they're easy to access also sometimes make people who are looking for a deeper immersion have to find a more specialized environment.
Do you have any fear in like where it's kind of turned to, and like how many random things are just like popping up, and Like,
I mean, yes. I mean, I have insecurity and fear about things all the time, but I feel like yoga has been continuing. I mean, look, how people practice yoga has always evolved. Like yoga did not used to be a group environment at all. I mean, you can probably like, if you were having this conversation with someone, in their 80s that used to practice with Krishnamacharya or Desikachar, they'd be saying, well, you guys are crazy. You do yoga in groups? That's when it changed. Yoga's
right.
you know what I mean? So I think we have to always be generationally careful to like not get too hung up on how things change because it's just so inevitable. So yeah, I get where I get insecure is whether or not the longer format, more nuanced kind of content that I teach will still be relevant to a consumer base. But those are more my fears. I mean, I like that more people are doing yoga. I like that they're having access to it in more environment. I like that yoga is now not just some, for some esoteric thing, but it's this very pragmatic thing that you could do for an hour a day. Right. But yeah, is some of the nuance maybe being lost in the shuffle? Yes. So it's not so much a fear, but it is a reasonable understanding that some stuff gets a little bit lost in translation.
I mean, I feel like in my, and it's same, I can only speak to like where I'm at with it. My interest level, from 3 years yesterday to today is different, but my interest level from, for instance, being in your training where I was really starting to understand, what I was doing and how I was doing it and putting language behind things that I thought I understood to now is like, whereas an hour class to me a few years ago was like great and it was perfect and it was like hot, sweaty room, let's do this. It's not enough. Like now I want like, at least a good hour and a half. And the first few minutes, I want to like stop, pause, listen, dial in. The next 30 minutes, I want to maybe start to warm up. The next hour, I want to start to move, but understand the movements and really be able to methodically think them out. And then, maybe like a sweet cool down afterwards where I can actually like integrate and mind map exactly, what I did and what my body did. And I'm sure part of it is to do with, my interest level now and what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching it has changed so much that I'm really into the subject. And so, the thought of going to a class, a 2-3 hour class where someone's like, let's talk about this for a little while, teacher mindset, versus just like, I'm going to go in and do the thing or not. But do you think that it'll ever swing back? I mean, you're saying right now that you're afraid people might not dig the nuancy things. In fact, I think it's different. I think more people are going towards that. I've seen, honestly, with the help of Instagram. I think Instagram has done some good and some not bad, but
sure.
There's so much now where it's people sharing like tutorials and how to do things or whatever. For me, I've seen people come to class and be like, oh, I saw this on Instagram. Can we work on this? Or, how do we do this pose? And, it's gotten them really curious, which is cool because it makes me, it makes me as a teacher like have to like dive in and think about what I'm going to do. I think personally that you're in a great spot because I think there's more and more people not just taking trainings because they want to become teachers, but they really, truly, deeply want to, I call them the architects of yoga. There's the athletes, there's the mystics, and then there's the architects. And the architect archetype are really, for me, really prominent in classes and even in discussions that I have with just random, people up and down the street. Do you think that there's any chance of yoga swinging back into maybe that more like, let's do this as like a thing for a few hours together? Or you think it's going to be?
I mean, in some ways it's here, right? So I think about it like this. Look, Ramanan still teaches those 3-hour classes. I still teach advanced trainings where it's all day for weeks in a row. People are going on retreat and doing yoga all day. So I think what we have to look at is the broader context and not just the individual class, right? It's kind of looking at like a mutual fund versus an individual stock, right? If we just think about hour-long classes, look, hour-long classes, they're necessary. They're going to serve their role. I'm glad they exist. but they are the most entry level access point for practicing yoga. And then depending on kind of where that takes you, if a 1 hour practice to move and breathe and sweat is all you want or all you ever want, and it's a complement to other facets of your life, great. But if doing this practice starts to become like a deeper, more, you want to investigate that interest a little bit deeper, then you're doing workshops, then you're going to do a series, then you might get all the way into teacher training. So I think really what we have is we just have more environments, and in simple answer to your question, no, there's literally no possible way that shorter classes are going to phase out and longer classes are going to phase in. It's just, there's no way it's going to happen. But shorter classes will continue to abound. And then people that want to have longer practices will continue to figure out different ways to have longer practices. I feel like, this is kind of interesting, right? Because I've taught on Wednesday night for 21, maybe 22 years at 6:00. Now the location has changed a few times, and last night was the first time it went from a 90-minute class to a 75-minute class. And they wanted to do that on the schedule mostly because our friend and colleague Yvonne wanted to start an earlier class. So I'm like, all right, let's do it, man. Starting class at 8:00, that's terrible. Yes. Start class at 7:45. I'll end earlier. So It becomes a little bit my onus shortening that class 15 minutes to make sure that I scale it correctly and make it still feel like a complete yoga experience where I'm not just jamming stuff in. So teachers also have to be able to adapt and not feel like, oh, I have a shorter period of time, so I got to smash things in. You can still have that time to prepare, to move, to get into your focal points, and then a little bit of wind down, like you said earlier, to kind of mind map and integrate the work. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
I know that you said, I don't know why I just thought about this, but Tuesday, Thursdays, you thought for a while was 75 minutes when it was always on the schedule for 90.
Oh, yeah.
I remember outside, I was like, I ended class early. How? You're like, no, I didn't.
I was like, class was so good, bro. You made me 90 minutes. I get it done in 75. You're not going to pay me less. You're taking 15 minutes shorter. You're going to pay me less? No. All right. We'll keep it short.
You don't need those. You don't need those 15.
You don't need Shavasana, bro.
You're welcome. I remember you saying in training too. So this was it was a conversation. Something was like timing for different things, like how long do we warm up and how long do we this and blah 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 blah. And we had said, what was your preferred timing of a class? Like, was it was it an hour? Was it an hour and a half? What? You said 75 minutes was your sweet spot. And what was your what's your thought process on that?
I have two sweet spots, actually. For a drop-in class, 75 minutes. For everything else, 2.5 hours. So those are kind of the two things that I really like, because I just really treat those as different things. I'm a technical teacher. I teach pretty much the same sequence and the same focal points for an entire month. I talk for a minute or two at the beginning of class, let them know what they're going to do, why they're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I just feel like 75, when I'll be totally straight. When I'm teaching a 75-minute class, there is zero fluff. There's no white rice. There's no filler. Every single thing that I do is 100% relevant and necessary. Sometimes in a 90-minute class, there's little phases of class. I'm at minute 37. And I'm like, oh God, I got to stuff this in just a little. You know what I mean? Like I got to put a baked potato in here for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? But when it's 75,
this is a great analogy, by the way.
Yeah, when it's 75, I actually feel a little bit the pressure of the clock, where I feel like I can have this. One of my challenges is being concise. I'm more likely to kind of over teach, but in a 75-minute situation, it kind of forces me to be concise. And I think
Got
that
it.
that's good for me. I also just feel like when I practice at home in my own personal asana practice, that's about what it usually is. Like I don't usually practice for 90 minutes. It's usually somewhere between 45 and 75 minutes. So I just like that increment, and then everything else then takes on a totally different character.
Right.
A workshop is then 2.5 hours. That gives me 30 minutes to talk at the beginning, break everything out, do the demonstrations, tell people exactly what I want them to learn and why these things are important. And then it gives us that really like long lead up, that like big body, and then that slow descent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it. But that doesn't mean I don't like 90 minutes. I actually don't like 60-minute classes. I never have. I don't as a teacher, like I feel too pressured. With my style of teaching where I want to take some time to explain a few things, I just feel too pressured. But that 75 feels good to me.
Would in your trainings, I don't remember, and maybe that's shifted now, but do you think like same, I know your practice was probably somewhere around 2 hours, but when you facilitate the same kind of theory, like you do about 2.5 hours and then a little break and then 2.5 hour little break, or is it, you just kind of go through?
Wait, in what situation? When I'm doing
And like a training situation after workshop.
uh you mean like if I'm teaching an all-day training?
Yep.
Um it depends. It depends on a bunch of different things. It just depends.
Okay.
But yeah, often it's that 2.5 hours, then something, then 2.5 hours. That's often a time that just feels good to me. 3 hours is fine, but 3 hours is a long time, man. It didn't used to feel like that much of a long time, but again, I feel like I I teach better when I'm in an environment that requires me to be concise. And then yet it gives me enough time to do it. So super short doesn't work, but really long, and I'm likely to just go on.
What do you think is gonna? I mean, what do you think is gonna? What do you think the next thing is, or where do you think these classes are going? Like we're like, you've been doing this for a minute, and you've got your pulse on what you're doing, and you've established the thing really well through even all the changes and whatnot in yoga. What do you think? Like, where do you think we're headed?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like more digital content, more shorter increment content, more like yoga for X, Y, and Z content. So more integration of yoga with spinning, with Pilates, with functional training, it's interesting. Like you can see this from just seeing bodies, right? But like when I teach classes in San Francisco at Love Story Yoga, I'm one of the oldest people in that room. And when I look at the majority of my students and I see their bodies, I can see that they don't just practice yoga. There's too much tone in the lats. There's too much tone in the deltoids. Like you can just kind of see different bodies. So I think that a lot of the people, especially that are more millennial and going to class, I think they're climbing. I think they're spinning. I think they're training. I think they're boot camping. You know what I mean? Like they just oftentimes, I think that the modern yoga practitioner is integrating different physical practices within their discipline. Or at least that's what I get from my student base. And so I think we'll just continue to see more of that. And then I think also a little bit of what you referred to earlier is there's also some, it's kind of like there's some like being quiet, long format, and technical is now kind of retro. So there's always kind of that demand too of circling back to something that is less typical. So I think you're right, as you referred to it earlier, that technique is people are into it. Spending more time, people are into it. People doing restorative and yin practice, people are super into it because those are often the environments where they're complementing. They seem kind of novel in a way.
Right, right. I know you're doing. You also, I mean, you're practicing yoga, but you also do your BJJ stuff on the side.
I do. Yeah.
Those are the two things that you're into.
Yeah, and then I'll go to the gym usually like most days a week. I try to train jujitsu 3 days a week. If I do more than that, I'm just too burnt out, and the likelihood of injuries is just too steep. And then 2 days a week, I also try to do resistance training at the gym. Um, that's usually relatively light resistance training. There's not anything that I need in my life at this phase from like heavy weight training, like
Getting swole.
yeah, yeah. Well, that would be awesome. I'm too tired. I'm too tired from jujitsu, which is super impactful cardio wise.
Yeah.
So those days are almost like when I go to the gym for that, it's almost like PT. It's almost like I'm just getting in there. I'm strengthening things. I'm not working super hard. I'm doing whole body compound based stuff. My practice has really changed. So my practice is kind of most evenings. I usually practice most evenings or a little bit in the afternoon. And it's kind of more mellow and easeful practice than ever because of those other environments. And then 1 or 2 days a week, I don't really consider it a practice as such, but I have been climbing with my daughter, which is it's a blast. It's a blast to be able to go feel like there's another thing in my life I'm not good at. Man. But it's another way to be physical, and having a kid, finding those like sometimes it can be hard directly to relate to someone that's totally different age, right? So when you're doing something in common, it's this really nice middle ground. So doing that stuff with her is fun.
Jason, are you trying to be the cool dad?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
That's awesome. Well, Jason, I really can't say thank you enough for your time. I know you got tons going on. You're busy, and all the things. I mean, you've been an inspiration for many years, and it's so great to just get to chat with you on the show and share your insight. And
yeah, man, my pleasure. Anytime.
It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, brother.
You're welcome, Danny.